Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. We introduced the Bhagavad-gita to several people today. Two of them were from Pakistan. And one of them was on the verge of taking the Bhagavad-gita, but it was in a mattress store, and he was the manager, and then a customer came in. So he got off the hook. But the second one, Yusuf? Syed. Yeah, he took it. Yeah, we let him have it. Because he paid attention for a long time and was very patient. And nice, too. Syed also, he's not really familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, but he's a very open-minded, open-hearted person. And he took a Bhagavad Gita. I explained that we accept donations. I said we don't need the money, but when you give something in return for spiritual knowledge, it connects you to the previous teachers, so you can enter into the knowledge. As Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that you shouldn't teach this to people who are not devoted or austere. And one of the ways in which somebody can be very quickly become austere is to give a donation, because that's an austerity. And we can tell by the look on people's faces when we ask them generally. And also, it gives them a little opening for devotion, to give something that they had in their possession and they handed over. It shows good faith. So that's an opening through which they can then appreciate the Bhagavad Gita. It's something that Srila Prabhupada taught us. That he said when you give people the opportunity to offer something in return, then they'll walk away and think, well, what did I get? If you give it away for free, generally they feel that it's not that valuable. In any case, we asked him, and he said that he would like to go to his car and get something, so we went with him, and then halfway to his car, I told him that we do accept MasterCard and Visa, and so he stopped right there, and we just happened to have our CPA with us, who accepts credit cards, came over, and he offered a $30 donation for the Bhagavad Gita, which allowed us to distribute a few extra Bhagavad Gitas throughout the rest of the hour to some people who weren't in a position to give much, like the lady at the pizza shop who said she didn't have any money, but she would give us a large pizza for free. And we really appreciated it, but we had just had breakfast or something, I couldn't remember. But then I said, well, just see if you have a penny or two in your pocket. And then she looked at the tip jar that was on the desk, and she said, well, that's hers, the waitress, but I'll give you something from this. So she broke into the tip jar and gave benefit to not only herself, but the woman whose tip jar she raided. And she took a Bhagavad Gita. Actually, everyone we talked to today took a Bhagavad Gita. I don't think there's one person that didn't, right? So it was an exciting day. We didn't know who we were going to meet. Obviously, that's one of the ways that going out for book distribution is always exhilarating, because you don't know what's going to happen. Of course, we never know what's going to happen anyway in our lives. But when we go out for Krishna's service, and we don't know what's going to happen, and we know it's an authorized activity, so we're just depending on Krishna more than usual, then it tends to lift up the way in which we depend on Krishna. Because if I think I know what I'm doing throughout the day and what's going to happen, then I might not call out to him as much. But when I go out into the great unknown, known as the public forum, and I meet people who didn't necessarily ask me to intervene in their lives, and I'm doing so on behalf of Krishna, I have to be a little adroit and very present, especially in praying to Krishna for help. Don't you think? Some of you had a good experience today going out? Did anything like I'm describing happen for you today? Groups of us went out. Yeah? We have microphones now. The great opulence. There's 2 of them, so feel free.
Few of us went to the Walmart parking lot, and there was this man. He looked quite irritated, but I approached him, and he was not much interested in hearing to me, but I still kept speaking, and then he was holding a bag which was filled with glass bottles, and it fell off his hand, and all the bottles broke off. And I felt really scared. I don't know what he's going to do to me. So I looked at him, and he gave me a stern look, and then I walked away. So I don't know what to do.
There must be some kind of omen when somebody drops bottles like that. Anyone else?
So my experience was, I was with a group heard how people react when you show that you care about them. You know, if whatever you say, right? They just get attracted by your words, right? They feel that you care about them, right? And then this way, maybe they take a book not because of they want this book, but just because this attention to them. That's what I want.
Yeah, there was a big group of us. There was about, 15, you think? 15 of us. So when we'd meet people, each of us would introduce ourselves. Everyone would tell their name. And it felt really nice, to meet people just here, there, and everywhere. And there's always a sense that people are very interested to know something more about life, to find out some secret. And when we talk about the Bhagavad-gita, just in summary, it's very enticing for people. It's one of those, out of all the books that we have, it's really foundational, because it was directly spoken by Krishna. And those who read the Bhagavad-gita every day find that they realign themselves with the highest purpose of life, which is invigorating, because you know which way you're going and why you're going that way, and you know how to act, you know which way to act to get there. That's pretty exciting. We become discouraged when we're not sure where we're going. That's one way one can become discouraged. Or you know where you're supposed to be going, but you can't go there. You don't have the power or the wherewithal to do it. And Bhagavad-gita helps to solve those problems, because Krishna is very clear about how to work in the world according to one's capacity to be very productive spiritually. And Bhagavad-gita is accepted by the great munis and rishis and acharyas. In fact, all the acharyas from the various lines have not only revered Bhagavad-gita, but given commentary to Bhagavad-gita. And there are various scriptures in the world that have been interpolated. That means over time, because the writing gets passed along, certain parts get changed. But the Bhagavad-gita hasn't been interpolated, partly because it's so famous, and it's been protected very carefully by the great acharyas through the ages. So it's exactly intact the way it was when Krishna spoke it and the way it was recorded in the Mahabharata. Although different parts of the Mahabharata have been interpolated, that part has not changed at all. And also, Bhagavad-gita has been read and appreciated by people from all over the world. It's not just from one part of the world. It's not particular to any religion, but it speaks to all of us. And people can appreciate that when they begin to read Bhagavad-gita, especially when you get to the second chapter and Krishna talks about how we never die. We're only observing the changes of the body, but we're always staying the same. That really changes one's attitude and direction in life when one hears that and understands it, that I'm not my body. It's the main cause of difficulty for us in the material world, is to mistakenly think that I am the body. So Krishna goes at once to this concept with Arjuna to say that you've always existed and even after the demise of the body, which he says is actually before our very eyes, changing at every second. You go on, you exist on, you're in a continuum. And also that you can't be destroyed. There's a psychology when I relate to the material body that I can be destroyed at any time. All living entities in the material world are timid because they always feel that I'm so fragile and at any time I can be attacked from any direction and I can be devoured. We're threatened, as Prabhupada says in the introduction to the Gita, with non-existence. And this is the most frightening concept of all, that I can cease to exist. So I feel like I'm being stalked by a tiger around any corner. I can be devoured. But Krishna comes out and says, you can't be destroyed. There's no weapon that can destroy you. You can't be drowned. The soul is eternal. It goes on forever. So that's an important orientation. Otherwise, I'll continue to be fearful for my so-called existence, which is really not my true existence. It's something I'm simply identifying with temporarily. Which, there's a few points. I want to read you a definition of birth and death that is very precise. It's given by Krishna to Uddhava in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is for those of you who are keeping score, you have scorecards, 11.22.39-40. Here's a precise definition of birth and death. Ready? Yes. Say yes. Yes. When the living entity passes from the present body to the next body, which is created by his own karma, he becomes absorbed in the pleasurable and painful sensations of the new body and completely forgets the experience of the previous body. This total forgetfulness of one's previous material identity, which comes about for one reason or another, is called death. Shall I read it again? Yes. When the living entity passes from the present body to the next body, which is created by his own karma, he becomes absorbed in the pleasurable and painful sensations of the new body and completely forgets the experience of the previous body. This total forgetfulness of one's previous material identity, which comes about for one reason or another, is called death. You like? Yes. I'll read the purport by the servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Depending on one's karma or fruit of activities, one may achieve a beautiful, wealthy, or powerful body, or be degraded to an abominable condition of life. Taking birth in heaven or in hell, the living entity learns to completely identify his ego with the new body and thus becomes absorbed in the pleasure, fear, opulence, or suffering of the new body, completely forgetting the experiences of the previous body. Death occurs when the specific karma allotted to a physical body is finished. Since that particular body's karma is used up, it can no longer act upon one's mind. In that way, one forgets the previous body. The new body is created by nature so that one can experience the karma currently in effect. Consequently, one's entire consciousness becomes absorbed in one's current body in order that one can fully experience the results of his previous activities. Because the living entity falsely identifies himself as the body, bodily death is experienced as death of the soul. Actually, however, the soul is eternal and is never subject to creation or annihilation. This analytic knowledge of self-realization is easily understood in Krishna consciousness. So we have storehouses of karma that cannot be used up in one short lifespan. So after we finish one life, there's another arrangement made for us to experience the karma that we have stored up. And we just forget the last body. There are cases, University of Virginia has a department that studies children who remember their past lives. It's a scientific department. They're not sentimental about reincarnation or anything like that. But the department was funded by a wealthy industrialist who wanted to know more about reincarnation from a scientific point of view, and he funded the department. And there's several books that have come out of that. Sometimes children, when they're at a certain age, begin to speak about their previous birth. And they'll give specific instances of their family members, mother, father, the place they lived, how they died, and so forth. And these scientists who work in this area investigate them. And they only keep the ones that are scientifically viable by going and doing the investigatory work and corroborating the stories of these children. And they have thousands of them where they go and they check out the stories. And the children, there's a window of opportunity for them to remember when they're young who they were in their past life. And the details that they give are then corroborated and then recorded. And when there's a certain number of matches, they consider it to be viable. So this is consistent with this explanation, that I'm simply passing through one lifetime. I identify very intensely with this particular situation, but then when I go into the next body, I forget my previous existence and I simply identify with this one. You can imagine if you were to remember your previous life or lives, that it would be a little hard to get on with your life in this life. In fact, for those children that do remember, it's a little bit troubling, not only for the kids, but also for the families. What are you talking about? You have another mother. I'm your only mother. But if we were to remember, if men were to remember, oh, I was a woman in my last life, or a woman was to remember, I was a man in my last life, or the details of these kinds of things, it could be a little disconcerting, don't you think? Little? Yeah. Okay. So now the other side of it. Yes, sir.
So I read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that when the living entity goes into the new body, when it's in the womb, it when it's about to come out, it remembers to Krishna and prays to Krishna, why did I get into the material body? But then when they're born, they forget all that, whatever happened. That's what I read.
Yeah, we talked about that this morning. I mentioned it. So thank you for bringing that up again. It's an important point. It's mentioned that there are some souls that are fortunate and they remember their previous births. In fact, up to 100 births while they're in the womb. And they see their entire existential situation and how they're situated. And they pray to the Lord that they can even stay in the womb, because they know when they come back out that their senses become externalized and they get overwhelmed because people surround them and start catering to them in a certain way, and then they begin a new chapter in life and they forget. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sings through the pen of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jeev Jago, Jeev Jago. In this song he's saying, my dear living entity, you promised in the womb already that when you came out you'd take to devotional service, but now you've come out, you've forgotten. So you can consider when you go out for Sankirtan or to anywhere to introduce people to Krishna consciousness, you're simply reminding people of a promise they already made. That I'll certainly serve you, and then you come out and it's like, I forgot. It's like, wake up, remember. Yes, thank you for that. Very nice. Did you just finish the third canto? Or are you on the third canto now?
Actually, I finished the whole thing.
You finished the whole Srimad Bhagavatam? Nice. You all got to keep up now. Okay, text number 40. O most charitable Uddhava, what is called birth is simply a person's total identification with a new body. One accepts the new body just as one completely accepts the experience of a dream or a fantasy as reality. Want to hear it again? 3 people do. Everyone else cover your ears. O most charitable Uddhava, what is called birth is simply a person's total identification with a new body. One accepts the new body just as one completely accepts the experience of a dream or a fantasy as reality. Purport. Identification with one's material body surpasses the mere affection and attachment one feels for the bodies of relatives and friends. The word sarvabhavena here shows that one totally accepts the material body to be oneself, just as one completely accepts the experience of a dream as real. Mere imagination without practical action is called a daydream. The mental concoction that occurs in a sleeping state is called a dream. Our identification with our own body and our blind acceptance of bodily relationships as permanent constitute a prolonged form of dreaming or fantasy in which one imagines oneself to be separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The term birth, therefore, does not refer to the generation of a new entity, but to the blind acceptance by the spirit soul of a new material body. I'm going to read that last sentence again because it summarizes the idea. Ready? The term birth, therefore, does not refer to the generation of a new entity, but to the blind acceptance by the spirit soul of a new material body. Blind acceptance of a new material body. Did you find those definitions useful?
Yes.
In what way would you use them? If you said yes. How did you find it useful?
It's surprising that so many souls accept this
We
reality.
have microphones now.
Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So is it surprising that so many souls voluntarily or involuntarily accept this as a reality, and then kind of it's not, so if every soul does that, then does it become a reality in itself?
Well, Devamrita Swami wrote an article about this in which he calls it mass consensual trance. There's a way in which people work together, develop social norms and so forth, just to help stay in this state of forgetfulness. After all, what's baseball for? Or cricket? A bunch of grown men wearing uniforms, and we identify so intensely with these things. But ultimately, it's a diversion from thinking about what the task at hand is, according to my position as a human being. And everyone agrees to it. And they develop big institutions, billion-dollar institutions around these kinds of things. Name things. Shukadeva Goswami says, welcome to the world of names. They're just invented names. People make things up. I mean, what's Pepsi-Cola anyway? Someone just made it up, but everyone accepts Pepsi or Coca-Cola. That's very American. What's American? Somebody made that up. Who decided on the boundaries? They're moving all the time. I mean, in California, it used to be Mexico. Before that, it was something else. If you look at a map chronologically and you look at the colors change, Iraq's been about 1,000 different, has had 1,000 different designations. But people who live there say, I'm Iraqi. Someone else a couple miles away say, I'm Iranian. And then there's some conflict. These are all kind of agreed upon false designations, and everyone sticks to that. So there's a solvent, just as if you ever got sap on you? Anybody? You know sap from a tree? Sometimes it gets in your hair, right? It could. It could get in your hair. It could get in your hands. There's a lot of different kinds of gunk in this world. Isn't there a lot of gunk? Yeah, confirmed. There's gunk everywhere you go. And gunk gets on you. And when gunk gets on you, what do? You have to have some solvent to get it off. Right? Well, shower. You can try a shower, but with sap it won't work. Because for every piece of gunk, there's a specific solvent that dissolves it and makes it come out. Did you know that? Like if you get sap on your hands and then you just wash it with cold water, will it come off? You need something else. If it gets in your hair, if you look it up in the internet, someone will have some solvent. They'll tell you got to use alcohol or something like that. That will dissolve it. So this kind of ignorance that gets on us is like gunk. We're purely spiritual, but we get mixed up with a bunch of gunk and it sticks to us. And that's the problem. So what do you have to do when you get gunk on you? Just answer the question. What do you have to do when you get gunk on you? How do you get rid of it?
By using some solvent.
You need a solvent. That is correct. So the solvent for getting rid of the gunk of ignorance is mantra. This is a bona fide solvent. It will dissolve the kind of gunk that makes me think that I'm part of the material world, that kind of ignorance that's gotten on me. And so by chanting the Maha Mantra and hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's like a solvent. It dissolves those things. Krishna says, well, Sutta Goswami says in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, Ridyantaksto Hibadrani, Vidunoti Suritsatam. That by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one's the dirt of material existence that sticks to one assiduously, it begins to dissolve, and Krishna helps from within by taking that solvent. So you can think of that, how these kinds of misconceptions stick to us in the material world very readily. So you have to stay clean inside and out. It's mentioned in the Vedas that the way to stay clean internally and externally is to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the best solvent. Om apavitra pavitrova sarvavastam katopiva yasmarit pundarikaksham sababhyab yantara shuchihi. That whatever situation you're in, whether you're clean or not, if by chanting or remembering the lotus-eyed Supreme Personality of Godhead, you become free from ignorance. And you become purified, shuchihi, inside and outside, by the process of remembering. And the best way to remember is to repeat the names of the Lord, especially the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So today, when we sold Bhagavad-gitas, many people, everyone took a Bhagavad-gita, and then we'd ask them afterwards if they believed in prayer. They said they did, so we'd introduce them to our yoga, our prayer, our mantra teacher, meditation teacher was Vedan, was there? Huh? Ridhan. Ridhan was there, and he would teach them the mantra. And he'd ask them to repeat 2 words at a time. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And he corrected them if they made any mistakes. And they were happy to understand how to chant the mantra. And we all felt happy to hear them chant the mantra too, because most of us who were there studied enough to know that there's a powerful effect from repeating the mantra, and especially if somebody does it without any expectations or an interpretation of the mantra. They're just doing it because you asked them to. There's a powerful effect. So there's a way in which to actually come to a clear understanding about how I'm moving through this world and how I've become caught up in a dreamlike existence where I'm accepting something that's temporary to be real. And that is the process of Krishna consciousness. By practicing that, one can come to a very sober and complete understanding. And it's not a scary situation. It's not scary. What's scary is not knowing and being in ignorance and trying to hold on to misidentification. It's very inconvenient and sort of disturbing, actually. So Krishna consciousness clears that up. And there's a phrase that I found in the purport to the verse 334 in the Bhagavad-gita, in which Srila Prabhupada no, actually it's in the verse, that Krishna is describing how we should develop a clear conception of who we are and how to interact with the world. And he uses the phrase deliberate spiritual intelligence. Everyone please say. Yeah, it's a very useful phrase, so I'm going to read you the verse. As a special treat, I'm going to read to you from the Bhagavad-gita. Just because you've agreed with everything I've said so far. So, this is the last verse. Excuse me, I said 34. It's 343. And Krishna says, after he describes to Arjuna that one can see that there's a hierarchy. There's lowest of all the senses, above the senses of the mind. Above the mind is intelligence. Above the intelligence is the conscious living entity. And so one should, when one has proper spiritual vision, be able to observe these various hierarchical elements and to see that we're actually above the lower elements. And so he says in the last verse of this third chapter, thus knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence, O mighty armed Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Would you like to hear the purport? This third chapter of the Bhagavad-gita is conclusively directive to Krishna consciousness by knowing oneself as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without considering impersonal voidness the ultimate end. In the material existence of life, one is certainly influenced by propensities for lust and desire for dominating the resources of material nature. Desire for overlording and for sense gratification is the greatest enemy of the conditioned soul. But by the strength of Krishna consciousness, one can control the material senses, the mind, and the intelligence. One may not give up work and prescribed duties all of a sudden, but by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. By steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. By steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. Thank you. This is the sum total of this chapter. In the immature stage of material existence, philosophical speculations and artificial attempts to control the senses by the so-called practice of yogic postures can never help a man towards spiritual life. He must be trained in Krishna consciousness by higher intelligence. And again, the phrase I particularly gravitated towards in the verse is deliberate spiritual intelligence. So to be deliberate about anything requires that you deliberate. And when we deliberate about who we are and who we're not, we can come to a resolute or deliberate way in which we practice spiritual life, because we're very sure that we're not the material body. So we call this deliberate spiritual intelligence DSI. Everyone say DSI. DSI. What does DSI stand for? Deliberate spiritual intelligence. What's the opposite of that? Yes. Accidental spiritual. Oh, there's a gallery, a mezzanine. I didn't know. Hare Krishna. Accidental spiritual intelligence. Well, I would say if it could be that. I'm looking more towards when one's not been directed, when one hasn't deliberated properly, there's a way in which I may continue with this idea that I'm the material body. So, ignorance. So another way to pronounce ignorance is ignorance. I ignore my actual identity, and I pretend that I'm somebody else. And this is one of the practices of Krishna consciousness called Sambandha Gyan. Everyone say. It means to regularly discuss what is my relationship with Krishna and what is my relationship with the material world. What is my relationship with the material world? It's a trick question. That's what the Vedas say. Asango hyayam purusha. So sangha means relationship, and asanga means no relationship. Good news for everybody. You don't have a relationship with the material world. Doesn't it make you feel better? It's kind of like, and this is mentioned several times in the Bhagavatam, it's like waking up from a bad dream. You ever have a bad dream? One of my recurring bad dreams is that I'm going for a flight. I have to catch a flight, but I can't find my ticket. What? It is, but not at the time. It's very disturbing, actually. I can't find my ticket and know where it is. So when I wake up and I realize, oh, okay, I do have my ticket and everything's okay, how do I feel? Yeah, much better. So similarly, there are ways in which I may, in a dreamlike state, consider myself to be going through so many changes, but the Srimad Bhagavatam explains that I'm only observing a false identity. Just like if you see a reflection of the moon in a pot of water, and then the water becomes disturbed by the wind. It looks like the moon is shaking, but it's not. It's stationary in the sky. So similarly, when I see myself as a material body, I'm not actually that. It's just a reflection of myself. And then I become disturbed because I think this is me. And it's changing. So by deliberate spiritual intelligence means that one takes time to deliberate and decide, who am I? What is my real situation? And then apply oneself accordingly. So now we'll take a few reflections. It means anything that you heard so far that's stuck in your mind, any concept or phrase that you might be taking out of here with you, and if someone stops you in the front on that sidewalk out there, grabs you by the arm and said, what was that guy talking about in there? This is what you'll tell him. Sharanagata.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, having like this deliberate spiritual intelligence.
DSI.
Something that, yeah, I'll definitely, because it's deliberate means it's not coming automatically. There is like, you have to work towards it. That's what I was taking, that it's like it's the endeavor that you have to do it, and then Krishna will give you, and that is what is the combination of deliberate spiritual intelligence. So that is what I'm taking from.
Yeah, in the Gita, Krishna says that when you study this dialogue between myself and Arjuna, then you worship me by your intelligence. So just reading Bhagavad-gita regularly, and we recommend reading at least one chapter a day. In fact, Prabhupada recommended it. This is a small thing to do. If you just do the verses, it'll only take you 5 to 7 minutes. And I recommend that in order to keep this kind of practice going, that when you read a chapter of Bhagavad-gita, let's say you're going to read all the verses, the English translations to which chapter? You pick. 2. Chapter 2. Okay, so you're going to read them all, and when you start, put on your stopwatch, and then measure how long it takes to go through, and at the end you make a little notation and write down how many minutes it takes for you to recite the English to chapter 2 of the Gita, and then you can also make a notation how long it takes to recite the Sanskrit. And obviously you can add them together if you want to do both. But there's a way in which, if you do this, it's very practical, because the mind is always, when it's affected by the mode of rajas, it always wants to move on to something else. That's why when we're distributing books, and we stop somebody to tell them about the Bhagavad-gita, we tell them it's going to be really quick, because they're thinking, I got to go. That's what everyone thinks in the material world. No matter where they are, they're thinking, I got to go, I got to get out of here. Where's the next place I'm going to go? In fact, in traveling, I notice that wherever I go, there's always a sign telling me to go somewhere else. If you go through airports, I just noticed this, because you go through airports a lot, you notice these signs that are up. So you go through, and let's say you land in New Jersey, and then it says, you really have to go to Saudi Arabia. It's a beautiful place. And when you get to Saudi Arabia and you start going to the airport there, say, go to Australia. You go to Australia and it'll tell you, go to Los Angeles. And this way, there's this constant quixotic experience in the material world that I'm always moving from one place to another. In fact, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes Ramanda Brahmate Kon Bhagavan Jeev. He says that everyone's wandering in the material world. We're travelers. We're traveling from one body to the next. We're even traveling from one planet to another planet. And have you ever looked up the word travel? It comes from the word travail, which means to suffer. It's a kind of torture to have to be moved on all the time. Like nomadic people or people who are persecuted by the government. You read about it nowadays. There's all kinds of people, they can't stay anywhere. They're always being forced to move somewhere else. And then they come to another country, and then people say, we don't want you here, go somewhere else, get out. It's a miserable situation. They don't have any home. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying we're all like that. You may think, oh, I'm steady in my home and everything like that, but it won't last. It'll be dissolved at some point. We have to travel to some other place. So, and also, it's exhausting traveling, isn't it? Have you ever had jet lag before? What does it feel like? Okay, sleepy. How sleepy? Like you can't stay awake, right? It's not like, it's just like you get knocked out, sleepy. And you just sleep for how long? Who knows? It could be for hours. You could sleep through anything, right? When you have jet lag. What else does it feel like? Drowsy. Anything else? Disoriented. So now you know why babies sleep all the time. They have extreme jet lag. They just moved from one body to another, and who knows what planet they came from. Everyone has it. That's why people get disoriented, they fall asleep at night. Living entities are in a very disadvantaged situation. They're traveling from one place to the next. They're telling, go to the next place, come here, go there. They get there, and then there's nothing there, so they move to the next place. So this is a travail. It's a kind of suffering, moving from one place. What we really are hankering for is a place where we can stay. But Krishna says, the material world, you can't stay anywhere. And if you collect things and you put up a big tent and you say, this is my place, I stay here, someone will come and wreck it. Who will come and wreck your place? Look, animals could come. That happens. Animals could come and chew a hole in your tent, right? Or they could just knock down the whole thing and say, we're going to eat all the stuff and flatten your place. Who else will take away your place? Wind. We've seen it recently. You build a nice house and then the wind comes and it just knocks it down, right? How else? Natural disasters like wind. And what about the government could come and take it? There's lots of people who live in other countries and then the government changes and then says you don't own anything anymore. A lot of people in Cuba, when there was a revolution, they were living in expensive houses and so forth, and the government just came and said, guess what? It's not yours anymore, it's ours. There's the right of eminent domain. The government can invoke that. Like if they want to build a wall between here and Mexico, then they have to go take land away from people and say you can't live here anymore. So Any of these things can happen. So it's not our real home. We're always traveling from one place to the next. Who made the last comment? And what was I commenting on? So, one, Krishna says, just to refocus the conversation, in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna tells Uddhava, Shruti pratyakshamani aitiyam anamanam chatushpadam. Then he says, anyway, the gist of the verse is that you should hear from Shruti, from the scripture. You should use logic. You should take direct experience, and you should take wisdom that's passed down over generations to understand the material world's not a steady place. So you shouldn't put stock in it. You should try to find solid ground, which is not available here. What other comments do you have?
One question on the internet.
A question on the internet, okay?
Yeah, question is Divyananda Das. And Hare Krishna, question for Maharaj. If we say material world is like a dream, then can we call this material world real or is it unreal? And if we are in some sort of a dream, is it our karma that is making it a very deep sleep?
Let's see what he's got. Go ahead. I'm impressed. He just read the Bhagavatam. Let him answer.
So,
Put him on camera so they can see him.
so the answer is actually the material world is real. It's just like it's not a real home, but it's there. It's real. So otherwise, why would we like think it's our home or something? So it's not fake. It's real because like so like let's say it's a dream. You have a bad dream, right? The dream is well, you think it's not real, but since your mind created it, it's basically real because for your mind, because you can actually like see it in your mind, and that's what you're thinking. In the same way, the material world is actually real, but like Krishna made it with his own energy, so it cannot be fake.
That's the answer. That what you said at the last part. The other part was a little convoluted, but it was very good. And I think if you write an essay on this, then you'll get it very straight how to answer this question. But you did a really good job. So the last part is that because it's Krishna's energy, therefore it can't be false. However, it's temporary. And we're not temporary. There are various energies, and they have various qualities. The Vishnu Purana says that Vishnu Shakti Paraprokta Kshetra Gyakya Tatapara Avidya Karma Samgyanya Tritiya Shakti Rishite. There's three different energies of the Lord. One is the internal energy, the other is the external, and the other is the marginal. And so the external energy is constantly changing. And Krishna describes this in the Bhagavad-gita to be like a reflection. It is a reflection of the reality. So in one sense, as you were pointing out, it's real because it comes from Krishna, but it's temporary, and it's also incompatible with our nature because we're actually part of the superior energy, whereas this energy is considered to be lower energy, and it's not compatible with us. So it's very difficult for us to relate to this energy. So what spiritual life means is to realign oneself with one's true identity, and that is that I'm part of Krishna and I'm a servant of Krishna. And bhakti means to direct our love. Every living entity has the loving propensity. Everyone. And you see it in every species of life. When I was on Parikram going around Govardhan Hill recently, we just came back from the Kartik season. We spend that time in Govardhan hearing Bhagavatam, and we do Parikram as much as possible. And you see so many interesting things that are like metaphors for the philosophy. But one I saw early in the morning, because we start off at 5:30 for our walk around Govardhan Hill, and I saw a tribe of monkeys. They do travel in tribes. They're very territorial also. But they were asleep. Actually, one interesting thing was, this is not related to the point I'm about to make, but it's very interesting. There's a very narrow fence that goes along one part of the Parikram Marg, dividing it from the hill. And the monkeys, they're asleep, but they sleep right on the edge. Would you want to do that? I mean, they're fast asleep, but they balance while they're asleep on the edge of the fence. So it seems a little scary. But as the sun started to come up, I saw one mother monkey with a little baby. And of course, babies are cute in most species of life, almost all of them. But in monkeys, they look very human-like, and the little babies look so impish and helpless. And there he was sucking on her breast, and she was coddling him, and he was looking up at her in such a loving way, and she was looking very motherly. And it just, that image just stuck in my mind. And I remembered how Prabhupada talks about how every living entity has a propensity to love. That's the nature of the living entity, of the human experience. And so bhakti means to redirect that love towards Krishna. And then Prabhupada says in a talk that love means service. When you develop love for somebody, you want to do something for them. It's there's active love. Love is not something just completely passive. But there's a way in which you'll prove your love. You want to demonstrate it to somebody. So this is devotional service. So it's very natural, the process of bhakti, to reawaken that love and then direct it towards Krishna, because our relationship with Krishna is permanent, whereas the relationships that I develop here in this world will not endure. And that's a cause of great concern, because I don't want my loved ones to go away, but they do. And this can cause various psychological disturbances. And Krishna mentions them in the Bhagavad-gita. He says, Vita raga bhaya krodha yanmaya mamupashrita. So he says that because of my misaligned experience, giving my love to the wrong entities, misplacing it in this world, I develop a raga, a kind of attachment to things that won't last. That's always disconcerting. You get something, you become very attached to it, and you know it's not going to last. So raga means intense attachment to temporary things. And bhaya is another psychological condition that one develops in this material world. Maybe somebody can relate to it. It means fear. And it's fear of losing the relationships that I have now. There's always a deep-seated worry that whatever relationship I have in this world is going to be severed. And that's very concerning. And then the third psychological adverse condition is called krodha. And krodha means anger. So there's a way in which, because the material world is so topsy-turvy, and because it remains unexplained until I begin to study Bhagavad-gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, I become angry at all the different seemingly contradictory explanations that are given by various philosophers all over the world. One person says, there is no self, you're just nothing. That's a little hard to swallow. But some people try to swallow it because it's better than the pain of these psychological conditions that happen in the material world. I want to become nothing. And other people invent philosophies that just try to enjoy while you're here and forget about death. That's a little tricky also. They're all flawed in some ways, and they really don't satisfy or quell these mental disturbances. But Krishna says, Vita, you have to correct these three psychological problems. Raga, bhaya, krodha, which means attachment to things that won't last. That's kind of crazy. Like when you go shopping for a car, have you ever been given good advice about how to shop for a car? Or did you just go out and buy it at high-end retail? Anyone buy a car? Nobody bought a car? Who purchased a car? Raise your hand. Did anybody give you advice about how to buy a car? They did? All right, let me be the second then to give some advice. I received this advice many years ago, and that is, don't love the car because the car won't love you back. People go in and they fall in love with the car, and somebody says, that's really you. And they go, wow, I could see myself driving that. That is really me. I am. Like, it's red, and you dream about it at night. It's like, I'm driving in a red car. What are my friends going to think? I'll drive by the school, and they'll look in. It's like, where'd you get the red car? You know, and then there's this whole psychological attachment it gets. And I love the car. I said, how do you like the car? I love the car. Does the car love you back? No, it doesn't. It doesn't love you back. Don't love the car. Don't love material things because they won't love you back. And we know this intuitively because if you ever notice when there's a natural disaster and people go to their homes, what do they save first? I'll give you a list and you can tell me which one. Television set, sofa, parakeet. Yes? Parakeet. Okay, let's try another set. Cat, lawnmower, expensive jacket. Cat. Okay, we'll try one more. Goldfish, book, iron. Goldfish, okay, let's see if there's a pattern. Let's ask our panel up here if you see a pattern there in the three. Okay, confer amongst yourselves. No, huddle up. Turn around. I want you to make a huddle. Discuss it amongst yourselves. I want the panel to discuss, and I want you to elect a captain of your team. Come on, turn around, elect the captain to report your findings. We want this data analyzed, and we want it reported, please. Could you do that? Okay. Did you elect somebody? Was there a coup d'etat and somebody just took over? You're going to go. Okay, you report. Give him the microphone. We're going to hear a report. This is data analysis of the last three questions, and we're going to ask you, what pattern you see, and then we're going to ask you to tell what it means. Okay?
All three of them were living entities.
Okay. Don't give the conclusion. She's going to give the conclusion. So all three were living entities. Tell what you think the conclusion is. You can call a friend.
Living entities, so they like you love them and they love you back. Like
You don't love your lawnmower?
they don't love you back. They don't
Okay, very touche. She's right on it. So there's a pattern that you can analyze for yourself in your own life or in the lives of others. When pressed, natural disasters press people to the limit. And they have to make decisions suddenly. Like run into the burning house, who do you save? You save the cat. People come out all the time with the cat and say, what about all your money and stuff like that? I don't care. I got, what's his name? Steve. I caught Steve. My dog Steve, we go back 20 years, I'm not letting him burn in the house. This is because he's different. And so you can analyze just how people intuitively interact with the material energy. They don't love things. They love the living entities. And so then Shukadeva Goswami says there's a supreme living entity. He says, Atmanam Akilatmanam. He says, see how much you love yourself and those living entities who are in relationship to yourself. And then imagine that there's the origin of yourself, the self of yourself, the origin of all selves. How much you would be attracted and love that self, that living entity. And that's Krishna. And that's why bhakti is so effective, because if you can actually turn your attention towards that supreme object of love. It's just natural to love him. Then you'll become attracted to Krishna, and when you become attracted to Krishna and direct your energies toward Krishna, then everything in your life aligns properly. And when you don't, then it becomes troublesome, just like if your axle is out of alignment with the wheel of your car. It'll cause noise, and then smoke, and then fire. One of our cars caught on fire on the way home from Sankirtan once, because my temple president, Sir Das, was very thrifty, and he used to find cars that were so inexpensive. One of the cars, when we sat down in the front seat, it wasn't bolted down, so whenever we take off from a stoplight, we'd all go backwards. And one of the cars on the way home, we noticed smoke coming out of the back, and then we noticed there was a fire because the axle was out of alignment, the ball bearings had worn out, so we had to pull in and put the fire out. So that's what's known as dukh, or misery, when you're out of alignment. So bhakti is the way in which one aligns oneself. And how can you do that? You can do that by DSI, which means, what's DSI? It's a new brand. What is it? You got the first word, help him out? Deliberate spiritual intelligence. So you get that from the Bhagavad-gita. Actually, it's the great need of the world. People have grandiose plans, they have grandiose projects, but practically they're very ineffectual and they don't satisfy anybody because they're not properly aligned. So as small as our group looks here, as insignificant as it may seem, the Bhagavad-gita and our mission to read and distribute Bhagavad-gita is significant for the world because it helps each living entity become aligned with his or her own real nature and become happy. And that can happen within one sitting. We have so many reports of people who were misaligned in their life, and therefore there were fires burning in one place or another due to the friction. And then they read Bhagavad-gita and the fire went out. And internally they knew, okay, now I'm okay. Now I'm fine. That happened to me. I read the Bhagavad-gita, and as soon as I read the second chapter, I said, okay, now I know. I'm fine. I'm aligned with my actual nature. I'm not the body, I'm a spirit soul. So we can't stress enough the importance of reading the Bhagavad-gita at least one chapter a day. You have, if you want to experience the magic of Bhagavad-gita in your life, then I recommend that you make it a regular practice to read at least one chapter. What do you think? Good idea. Say good idea.
Good idea.
And would you like to try it? To do one chapter a day?
Yes.
Everyone say yes.
Yes.
Okay, so for those of you who will agree to do it, if you haven't already started, then make a vow. Well, I can't tell you to make a vow. You decide if you want to or not. But I recommend you make a vow, at least for 30 days. And try reading at least the Sanskrit or the English to one chapter of Bhagavad Gita every day before you go to sleep at night. And if you do, I'm going to give you a special card. I have them upstairs. It's a credit card, a free credit card I'm giving out. It's called Chad. Do you have American Express? Do you have an American Express? Get this boy a credit card. American Express, do you have MasterCard? MasterCard? Visa? Well, this is kind of like that. But you can use it anywhere. And I have it upstairs. I'm going to give it to you. It's called a Chad card. So Chad stands for chapter a day. So if you chant one chapter of Bhagavad Gita a day, I guarantee you'll feel great spiritual wealth in your life, and you'll become more efficient in everything that you do. Any of the psychological afflictions that I mentioned above, if they're there in any residual form, they will diminish by reading one chapter of Bhagavad Gita a day. You'll feel an exhilaration in your heart that I'm connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And how will you know that? Because Krishna is directly speaking to you through the Bhagavad Gita. and there'll be a spring in your step, because despite the fact that the world is fraught with problems, and your own lives are fraught with problems, am I right? Say yes. Yes. Come on, say yes a little harder. Yes. Thank you very much. Your problems you'll gain a perspective in your life that will help you to deal appropriately with these problems. And then you'll feel better about life. And not only that, you will become respected in society because you have something to offer to the conversation of the world that is actually valuable, that actually has an effect. There are many people that join the conversation. You can hear it on talk radio, which I don't highly recommend. You can hear it on in books and magazines, people writing articles, even good writers. But because they're speculating, they don't have standard spiritual knowledge through which to develop deliberate spiritual intelligence, DSI. Their DSI quotient goes way down, so practically nothing. Just semblance. They have just reflections of spiritual knowledge. But if you read Bhagavad-gita directly and then represent it to people all over the world, become a representative of Bhagavad-gita, you'll actually do good for others. By going to public assemblies, if you're at in any kind of social situation and people are discussing ideas, you can become expert at bringing up the topics of Bhagavad-gita. Not in a way that may intimidate people, but in such a way that it'll introduce concepts that are valid. I do this all the time. I go in the Bay Area, I go regularly to Salesforce. Anybody heard of Salesforce?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a big company. And they have huge corporate offices in San Francisco. They're the biggest, 5 high-rise buildings there. They have a lot of money. And I go to Google. Everybody heard of Google? Yes? You've heard of it? Okay. What? Okay, we go to the offices of Google and we meet with the employees there. These are very intelligent people. They've gotten superior educations, otherwise Google doesn't take them. And they've excelled in their fields of study. And Google then look at them at least. And they've performed extracurricular activities. They've done all the right things and to be accepted into these very high positions. But they're still starving for DSI, deliberate spiritual intelligence. They don't have it. And nothing in the world can replace it. It's just like if you get a fish and you take him out of water. And how could you make him happy? Let's see if there's some ways we could make him happy. Let me just make a few suggestions, and I want to see if you think this would work. What kind of fish is it?
Beta.
A what?
Beta.
What's a beta?
Beta fish.
Beta fish. What?
It's like a fighting fish.
It's a fighting fish? A beta fish is a fighting fish.
Aggressive.
It's aggressive? Okay. We'll deal with him. Okay, so we take the beta fish. How big is he? That's pretty small. We'd have to offer him some small thing. Okay, the beta fish is this small. He's very aggressive. We bring him out, and let's see if we can make him happy. Let's give him some chocolate. Would he like that? Okay. What about cigarette? No, fish don't like cigarettes. How about $1 million? You give the little beta fish, say, here's $1 million, take it, be happy. What will he say? No, he won't take it?
No, we can't even understand what he's saying.
You can't understand it?
It's a fish.
But what if we had a beta translator and we could tell him? And he said,
I just want to get back to the water.
okay, there it is. You gave us the solution. The beta fish, he won't take the chocolate, he won't take the cigarette, and he won't take what was the third thing?
Money.
He won't take the money. What will he ask for? I want to go back in the water. So this is it's a simple solution. It seems almost too simple. If you go through the duty-free section in Delhi, they're offering many different kinds of whiskey now. And you have to go through duty-free. And what else do they offer that's extremely valuable for our lives? Perfume. And what else? What's the third thing? Cigarettes. So now they have pictures up throughout the duty-free area, and it shows that you're going to look really glamorous. First of all, when people drink alcohol, do they look glamorous? The guy next to me on the plane, for breakfast, he had a couple of beers, and all the way he was conked out in his seat, and his body was trying to eliminate the alcohol, and you could just smell the alcohol in the area. I'm glad somebody didn't light a match. It might have blown up the plane. But it didn't make him happy. But this is the advertisement in the material world, that you can be happy by alcohol, cigarettes, chocolate, perfume, but it doesn't satisfy the soul. So you have to be fortified against this kind of idea that's propagated everywhere in the material world, that there's some superficial way that you'll be happy. The only way you're happy is you go back in the water, and that means Bhagavad-gita. Bhagavad-gita is the spiritual water. Some people say, where's God? They say he's in heaven. That's like saying, I'm thirsty. What is your name? Huh? Krishna?
Kushi.
Oh, Kushi. That's a nice name. So Kushi, let's say you're thirsty. Are you thirsty? Okay, tell me you're thirsty. I'd say, I'm thirsty, Vaisesika Dasa. Vaisesika Dasa. Okay, so then I say, okay, there's water in the clouds. You help yourself. That's the same as saying, okay, I want to know God, and you say, okay, he's in heaven. So how would I get to heaven? He's way up there, I'm down here. How can I relate to that, right? So then, tell me you're thirsty again.
I'm thirsty.
Okay, Kushi, you can go and find a flash flood and get some water. You know what a flash flood is? What is it? It's a natural disaster. It rains somewhere, and there's a way in which the water all washes down suddenly into an area and washes people away, washes towns away, and things like that, right? So you thirsty to get some water from a flash flood.
No.
How's that? No? Okay, tell me you're thirsty again.
I'm thirsty.
There's water in the ground. You can dig for it. How do you feel about that? Kushi doesn't like it. Okay. So people say, yeah, I want connection with the Supreme, with my higher self. I want to know God. And you say, he's in heaven. Or flash flood, you may say, okay, you can meet one of the avatars that shows up. You can't predict how you're going to take birth in the same place, be in the same place as an avatar. Or the yogis, they say, you sit down and meditate and you find God within your heart. That's very difficult. Kardama Muni sat for 10,000 years. I can't sit for 10 seconds because my phone will go off, right? I'll be distracted by one thing or another. But Bhagavad-gita, tell me you're thirsty. Bhagavad-gita is like water in the palm of your hand. You just drink it. It just comes to you. It's right there. You can hold it. You can drink it immediately, directly. You can experience Krishna right in your heart, speaking to you through the pages of Bhagavad-gita. Then your thirst goes away. Water in the palm of your hand. Thank you, Kushi. You did good. So this Bhagavad-gita is very important to the whole world, and Krishna meant it for everyone. In fact, it says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that by aiming his instructions at Arjuna, Krishna saved the whole world. And the only gap which was left for us, and especially for those born in Bharat, by the way, hate to bring this up right now, but the special responsibility for those born in Bharat is to teach Bhagavad-gita to the world. It's more important than teaching psychology. It's more important than teaching zoology. It's more important than teaching... It's more important than teaching... than teaching English. Try to put some ologies in. Sleeping, more important than sleeping? Astrology. Astronomy. Anthropology? Yes. Geometry. There are many important sciences in the world, but they all relate to the way in which I interact with the lower material energy. But Bhagavad-gita is the clear treatise, the clearest treatise in the world on how to directly relate to Krishna, the source of all energies, and to reawaken our relationship with Him. So we can actually have an impact on the world by reading Bhagavad Gita ourselves, becoming aligned with the teachings of Krishna and the Bhagavad Gita, and by distributing the Bhagavad Gita in mass all over the world. So I noticed when I came to this house that Loka, Vidarbha, and the whole team that's here is geared up for the Gita Jayanti that's coming up. Gita Jayanti is the day in which Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita, and this is a really good time to remember the importance of Bhagavad Gita and to do something about it. One of the things that we do in Silicon Valley is we all get together and we put our energies in one place so that we can purchase Bhagavad Gitas and then distribute it to many people. Today in Silicon Valley, the devotees all went to San Francisco. Did you see any reports yet? It's 6 o'clock. Do you know how many Gitas they distributed? Their goal was to distribute 1,000 Bhagavad Gitas today. 1,000 downtown San Francisco as a group effort. And one of the ways that they're distributing, for the marathon, their goal is to distribute 22,000 Bhagavad Gitas over the next few weeks. And one of the ways they're doing that is the devotees are donating. They're giving money to sponsor Bhagavad Gitas, and many of the Gitas are going out to places like motels. We're finding great success. The motel industry is dominated by the Gujaratis, our best friends in the world. The Gujaratis are the most pious people practically in the universe. And they're running these motels, so they put the Bhagavad Gitas in each drawer. So far, this project Motel Gita has put almost 500,000 Bhagavad Gitas in motel rooms. And that's one of the places they go. And the other place, they're going out to venues all over the world, just introducing people one-to-one to the Bhagavad Gita. And it changes people's lives dramatically. What to speak of those who contribute towards the cause. Krishna says that there's no one in this world more dear to me than that person who teaches Bhagavad Gita to the world. So Loka told me about this just before I gave a class, so I thought I'd mention it. That this team, you're a very powerful team here in North America, working together can do some considerable damage to the material energy by taking advantage of the Gita Jayanti. Everyone can donate something, whatever you can afford, either time or you can give money or at least give some encouragement and say, good job, keep doing it. And by that, towards this goal of distributing, what is your goal here for the Gita Jayanti? 20,000 Gitas? 5,000 Gitas, altogether possible if everyone, a lot of people each do a little bit. Loka, you can ask Loka more about the details of how to do it, but you can sponsor cases of Bhagavad Gita, and then they'll make sure, the team will make sure that they get distributed. You'll all work together to do that. Is that correct, Loka? Did I say the right thing?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, it's a cause that's close to my heart because I've been involved with book distribution since I joined the Krishna Consciousness Movement in 1973. The first Bhagavad Gita we had was a gigantic paperback Bhagavad Gita by Macmillan. It was this big. We handed it to people. It had a little price tag on the top too. It said $4.95, and we used to scrape that off so that they didn't limit themselves in donating. And throughout the years, we've seen that so many trends have come and gone in the world, but the Bhagavad Gita remains steady as the light of the world. So it's a great opportunity for all of you to take advantage of it. Right, Loka? Okay. A couple more reflections. Yes.
You started out with very liberating, eye-opening definitions of birth and death. They were very helpful in reminding us that we need to get out of the cycle of birth question that remembering the supreme personality of Godhead is the best solvent, no matter what condition of life we are in right now. And how in 343 verse that is cited in translation, Srila Prabhupada says Krishna consciousness is deliberate spiritual intelligence, steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. Thank you for.
Thank you. So that handles all the reflections for the night. Is Lakshmi still here? You think you could be enticed to come in? Yes.
My question is that you said we should try to read one chapter a day.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You want your card, right?
Is it recommended to read in Sanskrit or English?
Both are good.
If
Today-
you understand Sanskrit, is it still good?
Still good, yeah. You can learn how to pronounce it. Otherwise, English is fine, but both are good. The Sanskrit has potency. Understanding what it means is very important. So you can do either way, whichever appeals to you. If you
One word better than the other. It's not.
well, if you struggle with Sanskrit and it's not something that really attracts you to pronounce it, then you could just do the English. It's just as good.
I like the Sanskrit better, but I don't understand when I'm reading them.
Then do both. Like one day do the Sanskrit, next day do the English, or do both at the same time. Sanskrit, English, or all the Sanskrit, then all the English. Several ways you can do it. But to be a member of CHAD, which is a worldwide underground organization, you just have to agree to read at least all the verses to one chapter every day. And it could be either just the Sanskrit or just the English, or it could be both and the purports and everything like that. And if you do that, you're a member of CHAD. If anyone wants to admit it, how many CHAD members are in here? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I heard last night a lot of devotees are saying that reading one chapter a day, and they're starting to learn the whole chapters because it starts to get in your mind. And so, yeah, it's highly recommended. Yes, 1, 2.
Maharaj, you were suggesting, you were telling that we should be reading the whole chapter. But like if you're doing the 18th chapter and it has verses, 17 verses. So what we do is we're dividing it into 3 parts. So in a day we read 20 verses, English and Sanskrit. Is it recommended or do
Yeah.
we do specific?
That's good, just as long as you keep going. Okay, last one.
I wanted just to share my experience, right?
Yes.
I started reading 2 months, chapter a day, like every day, Sanskrit and English. Before I was wondering how the devotees can remember the verses actually, and now I can say I remember. And Krishna gives me different kind of situations which I can relate with different verses from Bhagavad-gita, a particular chapter.
Naturally, you'll remember them. Yes, that's important. Did you have a point, Anita?
Since I'm also a member of CHAD, I just wanted to clarify that we get the emails, and in emails it is said that you have recommended to do chapter 5 or chapter 9 or chapter 12, and this time particularly it said that from last Ekadashi to the upcoming Ekadashi that is coming on the 12th, around 12th of December. We are supposed to do the 6th chapter, verse 1 to 23, and then move on to 23 to 47 onwards. So is it okay to do it that way, like since?
Oh yeah. There's actually an organization behind it. They have a website, and you can register there as a member of CHAD. We'll activate your credit card, and then you can follow along with everybody else. And then you can write in when you're finished, and they'll recognize you that you finished. And it's nice to be with the group. There's even calls you can get in on to keep you steady in your CHAD. But if you're going to do something for the end of the year and on to the new year that will change your life dramatically, we recommend this CHAD. And also we recommend sponsoring Bhagavad-gitas as much as possible. Because if you give your money for sponsoring Bhagavad-gitas, then you'll get huge spiritual reward from, and it actually has some effect on the whole world, whereas many other things don't have so much of an effect.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.